Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're excited that so many of you could join us today for on the therapeutic applications of MDMA. I'm Jason MacArthur, the events coordinator for the Public Programs Department of the California Institute of Integral Studies, a nonprofit university in San Francisco. As many of us are descendants of settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcibly brought to this continent, we, CIIS Public Programs, must recognize and never forget that our university's building in San Francisco occupies traditional, unceded Ramaytush Ohlone lands. If you are interested in learning more about Native lands, languages, and territories, we encourage you to visit native-land.ca. Now, let me first introduce our presenters, Keren Tzarfaty and Gisele Fernandes-Osterhold, and then we'll get right to the conversation. Gisele Fernandes-Osterhold is a licensed psychotherapist, associate professor at CIIS, mentor at the Center of Psychedelic Therapies and Research, and clinical supervisor at the SAGE Institute. Her clinical and academic work is trauma-informed, rooted in somatic, humanistic, and transpersonal psychologies with a focus on social justice and embodied spirituality. Keren Tzarfaty is the co-founder of the Hakomi Institute of Israel and a trainer for MAPS in Israel. She is a clinical investigator in the FDA-approved MDMA PTSD clinical trial, examining the impact of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy on patients with severe PTSD. She holds a master's in somatic psychology and a PhD in East-West psychology, both from CIIS in San Francisco. She specializes in integrating mindfulness-based psychodynamic psychotherapy with somatic psychotherapy, attachment psychotherapy, trauma psychology, and transpersonal psychology. Her approach is grounded in traditional Western psychologies as well as inspired by Eastern and shamanic spiritual traditions. And now, let me turn it over to Gisele and Keren.
Good evening, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here with you, Keren, this evening in the Psychedelic Spring series. Welcome back to CIIS.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here with you and with everybody.
Yes, you are here today as a co-founder of MAPS Israel to talk about the development of the research with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. But before we go into this treatment modality, would you like to tell us a little bit of your story with CIIS since you started your career here as a student?
Mm. Yeah, well, I was a lawyer in Israel, and I was very much into my own process, kind of exploring my own psychology and somatics and transpersonal experiences. And then I heard that there is a place, a magical place in San Francisco, in which I can learn about integrative somatic and spiritual psychotherapy. And I was very, very excited and came and was interviewed by Ayn Grant at the time, and was accepted with lots of, I can remember the hug he gave me after the interview, and I felt very happy and blessed to join the community at CIIS and to learn the master in somatics. And then I felt that something is missing for me. There was not enough clinical work with the more spiritual or mystical experiences of who we are. So I decided to continue to have my PhD in the East-West, in which I celebrated all this transpersonal field. So I spent 7 years in CIIS, and I loved every moment. I feel very grateful for my time there. Yeah.
It's wonderful that we have that in common. We both graduated from the somatic psychology program at CIIS, and Ayn Grant, bless his soul, was also one of the people who welcomed me the same way that he did with you, a big heart that he had. And
yeah, and I met you in CIIS, just
yes.
to say.
Yes. So it's wonderful to be here today talking about the psychedelic renaissance and the decriminalization efforts, the medicalization of psychedelics. And so how do you see this potential for the therapeutic use of psychedelics at this moment in your career, at this moment in the world? How is that?
I think we're in a special time in which we bring the wisdom of traditional and more like earth-based cultures into the West through psychedelics, and also the wisdom of the underground communities that are kind of carrying this work for many, many years, and the wisdom we discover in the studies and the research. So I'm very excited about it. I feel, it almost, I can see an impact in two different ways. One is on the care itself, of how we can invite people to explore their wounds and their um, organic parts of who they are in a very integrative way, in experiential way, meeting themselves in a very direct and deep way. But also, other than just working with the care for people, also working with the caregivers. And I think there is something about psychedelic therapy, if we'll be lucky enough and wise enough to offer it in an accurate and professional and safe way, also to professionals in the field, I think we can change the way therapy looks like. And this is a this is a piece I'm very passionate about, to invite psychotherapy, psychiatrists, social workers, art therapists, and so on to to know this field, to know this kind of work, and to know how to offer um, psychotherapy that is experience based and body, mind, spirit based to other people. I think it's meaningful because we don't, in most cultures, in the West at least in Israel, I would say, we don't have the shaman role in the same way we used to have. We used to have it, and I think there is something about psychotherapy that offers a container that invite people to explore who they are in the way the shaman offer in the past. So for me, thinking about psychedelic therapy as a way to change the healthcare um, system is a meaningful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're bringing up the idea of not only the patient being transformed by the work, but the psychotherapist being transformed by the work, and in that doing the work differently. And so it's a possible whole shift in the concept of healing and how clinical work is done. And I would even go a step further to include medicine, because if we think about doctors and nurses working in hospitals and how much secondary traumatization, how much compassion fatigue they suffered from, we can, and I know that there are projects already in place, research projects that are looking into care for the caregiver, right? To support the frontline workers. And what would the work in a hospital look like if doctors and nurses and staff would have the support for their own healing in a profound way? So I think there's a possibility here for a revolutionary movement in the field of psychology and the field of medicine and healing in general.
Right, right. Because I think as caregiver, if we carry um, the knowing of where we can go in ourselves, and also in the way we give back, I think that's a place a real transformation can happen. And I think maybe one more thing to say about that, in the West, and I'm making generalization, but forgive me for that, but just saying that the therapy is very much focused on the individual. And if we really surrender and get to know deeper psychedelic work, we learn to expand beyond our individual, beyond our more personal self. And there is something about that that is opening us up. And from this place, we can really, I think, offer a transformation or processes of healing or growth in a deeper way and in a much more useful way. So I'm hopeful about that.
Wonderful. We'll get into that more deeply as we unfold here, because the audience is here to listen. More information about MDMA assisted psychotherapy tonight, so we will try to focus on that. It has been a Schedule 1 drug for over 35 years, and it's also known as a party drug, as ecstasy or Molly, and which is not the same as the pharmaceutical MDMA, what's used in the research. So would you tell us a little bit about the difference between MDMA and the pharmaceutical use of MDMA and the classical psychedelics?
Mhm.
Just the overall effect that the drug brings about.
Mhm. Right. So when we talk about MDMA, which is, I think, is psychedelic too, but it's not part of the group of the classical LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca. I think one thing MDMA does really well, and of course it's always with the set and setting, with intention of going inside and looking at different wounds and different resources and healthy parts. So I just will say that in this context, the MDMA is allowing us to meet ourselves or meet ourself in a capital S in a very healthy way. So it takes away some of the shame, the defenses, places in us that are stopping us from moving towards our process of healing, and it creates or it helps integrate a healthy sense of self and an experience of me being love, or me being creativity, me being part of some kind of basic healthy knowing. So there is a sense of being wise, loving, connected, and from there to look at different psychological complexes or difficulties, or looking at my vision to where I want to go. So in a way, I think MDMA is teaching us in the right set and setting how to live life, how to live fully, how to come from places of connection and empathy, and how to take responsibility on our wounds and our difficulties and explore them. While classical psychedelics, they create, and it's again a generalization, but many times it creates an experience of ego dissolution. So the self is actually, there is an experience of melting. The boundaries are melting, and the sense of who am I as a Keren, as a personal self, is kind of melting and changing. And I start experience myself not so much as Keren in this body mind, but as something bigger than me. It can be nature or the divine or the existence itself, or yeah, different things that are both me but are much bigger than my personal identity. So in this sense, while MDMA is teaching us how to live, I think the classical psychedelic teaches us how to die, how not to be only Keren. And then this process of allowing myself to know life and myself and my personal identity as not so much existing, but as part of something bigger, allow us to live fuller. Because if we are okay with kind of not being that, or in some ways okay with dying, we can come without this fear to life itself. Yeah.
Yeah, so MDMA is known as an entactogen, right? A substance that stimulates the feelings of empathy, of openness, of emotional closeness. And it's also known for its empathogenic effects that helps with the self-forgiveness and self-compassion. And in that way, it has a good combination for therapeutic work. Now, this effect that this substance does, how does it change the brain? Is it, you want to say something about, the temporary or the long-term effect that these feelings, these phenomena will come about for a participant, a client?
Mhm. So I'm not a neuroscience, but I will say a few words about the brain. So what we know, we don't know a lot, but we do know that there is much more oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all those materials that makes us feel exactly what you named, and the feeling of connection and love and empathy and forgiveness towards oneself and towards other too. And all those experiences, on one hand, they're temporary. Yeah, there is maybe our 8 hours of very strong experience from the beginning to the end of the session of having all those qualities of the experience from which we can not only experience them, but also look at ourselves and at our traumas or difficulties and challenges in life, internal challenges, depression, anxiety, different trauma symptoms. So in a way, it's temporary, but if we invite the process to continue in an integration process inside psychotherapy, there is almost a feeling or an experience of the empathy, the connection, this way of being is being embedded into the nervous system, into the body-mind system, into our behavior, into our perception. So the experience itself and the pharmacological qualities of it are definitely temporary, but it has a lot of potential to rebuild us or reintegrate us into those ways of being that are based on love and creativity and empathy and connection and compassion, which really are so missing in our culture, right?
Mhm.
It's not how we usually walk in life, unfortunately, other than CIS students, of course.
And faculty,
Very faculty,
hopefully.
of course. Yeah.
So let's get specific with the work that MAPS has been developing, because you are a frontline worker. You are a co-founder of MAPS Israel with Rick Dublin, and you've been a principal investigator in a number of studies. You are a clinical director, you're a supervisor, you train people, you have so much experience. And the clinical trial now for the use of MDMA to be used with PTSD is in phase 3, right?
Mhm,
In the
mhm,
US and Canada and in Israel. And for the audience, to clarify, the phase 3 is when you already succeeded with the results in phase 2. And that's when that gets approved for the general use. And in phase 3, you're going to then just confirm the effectiveness, right, and the safety, so
mhm,
that this treatment can be used against the current standard treatment.
mhm.
So speak a little bit about your role in this development and what is the specific focus of the research that you are involved in at this moment?
So I start when I finished. I was in the midst of my PhD, but I finished the coursework and moved back to Israel from California, which I miss a lot every day, just to say it's very important. And then I went back to Israel and I met Rick Dublin, who is really, I think, will get a Nobel Prize for what he does. And I really is one of the people that inspired me in the work we do in Israel. He's really a force of nature, I would say, with lots of wisdom and creativity and energy. And yes, I was very blessed to work with him for many years now. And the research was already opened in Israel, but it was done with psychiatrists. The therapists were psychiatrists that didn't have, I would say, somatic or transpersonal clinical background. So it didn't work well. The study did not work well, and Rick came to Israel and he had to change the therapist. And me and Ido, who is my partner, and both my professional partner and my husband, Dr. Ido Simeon, came and kind of joined as the therapist with other people too. And we started phase 2. And it was very successful. The results of phase 2, 68% of the people that got the MDMA, the participant that came with a very severe PTSD, were not considered to have PTSD a year, 12 months after the treatment was over. That's also why the FDA declared the study as a breakthrough study. So we did phase 2 in Israel, one of, I think, 5 sites in the world. And after finishing phase 2, we continued to phase 3, and we are now in the midst of the study. So my role there was I started as a therapist and a supervisor, and then there was a need, there's so many people with PTSD in Israel specifically and in the Middle East. We're in quite a traumatic neighborhood in the Middle East. So we had a very, very long list of people applying to the study for the end of phase 2. phase 3 for sure. And just to tell you an anecdote, at the beginning of phase 2, we had no people coming into the study. It was a problem. We couldn't get participants. People got scared, drug and research in humans. And also in Israel, we do the studies in hospitals. So it's inside a hospital, and some of the hospital has a kind of a iffy reputation because it's a mental health institute. So people didn't want to be connected to it so much. So we didn't know what to do. And then we invited Stan Grof to be our guest in Israel. And we spent a few weeks together. And he went through Israel with us and gave lectures. And we did holotropic breathwork workshop. And every time he was finished speaking, I came and I said, and we have this study about MDMA for PTSD, just, and then we got people coming into phase 2, and we were able to finish the study, the phase 2 part. And now we have 700 people in our waiting list, and more calling. Really, I'm getting phone calls every day. So we had the need to train more therapy. So slowly I became a trainer in EDO too. And we trained already, it sounds not so many, but for us in Israel, which is a small place, it's smaller than New Jersey, we trained 30 people in the first training, and now we're in the midst of 40 more. They're in the midst of the training. And slowly we're developing, and we got the Ministry of Health in Israel is very supportive, and because of the problem of PTSD in Israel, they feel the need to find a safe and good model of therapy for PTSD. So they got very excited after phase 2 was over and they saw the results, and they approved us to offer the treatment in a open access, compassionate based use for 50 more people. And that's a project that we are in the beginning of and going to start in the next few months. Yeah. So that's
wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wonderful story. So we'll get into the details of that, but I love hearing about your efforts along Stan Grof and, really humanizing the field, right? Because there has been so much prejudice and stereotypes with mental health and mental illness, that there's some barriers there. And so it's beautiful to hear you talk about just to offer the work at the beginning. And wondering, as you reflect back on phase 2, were there any adjustments made to the research as you move into phase 3?
Well, in Israel, in phase 2, we had a protocol that included 2 MDMA sessions. So we had 12 meetings of psychotherapy. 2 of them were with MDMA. And in phase 3, all over the world, we added 1 more session of MDMA. So with some participants in the second MDMA session in phase 2, we noticed a new memory that showed up, especially with complex PTSD. So I think they needed more time under the MDMA to process and to work with the memories, the trauma, to create a reintegration. So we added 1 more session, and I hope and believe to see that the results of phase 3 will reflect that too, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about more specifics about the research. So you said the sessions happen in the hospital, and in phase 2 was 12 sessions with 2 MDMA sessions. And phase 3, you have a 3rd session because that expanded a little bit the treatment and gave the patients another opportunity with the medicine. So who are the clients and how did they arrive at the clinic? So you did a little bit of propaganda and outreach in the beginning, but who did you get? Do they come by themselves? Are they diagnosed before they come? Are there psychiatrists sending clients? And then tell us a little bit also, how are the sessions being conducted, who is a part of it, and a little bit of the standards, the atmosphere, the length. Just give us a picture of from beginning to end of what it looks like, the research trial for MDMA assisted psychotherapy.
I'm happy to. So I would say that the first phone call is usually from a participant or from a participant's family member, people that are in the same boat, difficult boat of the PTSD with the patient. So the people. We also get a phone call from therapists asking about their clients and looking for some kind of hope, because PTSD is such a severe wound and the symptoms are awful, especially the people we see that are with severe PTSD. So those are people that suffers from depression, from anxiety, from nightmares, flashbacks, lots of avoidance, not doing a lot of things because things are triggering the inner experience of the fear and the terror. Um, so it's a severe condition, and just uh, just reminding us about what we talked about the MDMA, about the experience of it, the empathy, the connection, the compassion, the love. It's exactly the remedy, to this inner experience of the PTSD. So those are the people that are calling us. And again, at this point, although we get so many phone calls really every day, we already have a long, long list from which we pick the people. They're waiting on this waiting list for a few years now. And then they come in and we start a screening process that is led by the team of the research, so psychiatrists and research assistants, and we're trying to see if the research is a good match for them, if they have PTSD, if the PTSD is in the severe enough for the study and so on. So there is a screen, and also if it's safe enough for them, if they're healthy enough, no heart condition, and also from a psychological point of view, if they don't have any inclusion exclusion mismatch. So we need to see that it's a safe and appropriate protocol, clinical protocol for them. And if they go through the screening, then they meet two therapists, usually a man and a woman in Israel, but it doesn't have to be. We have different options. And we start the process. And the first thing we do is putting the intention, so looking at the mindset and inviting them to look at what they're wishing for and what they want from the therapy. What is that they're praying for, asking for? And we start working with the intention, and of course exploring in a very somatic way with mindfulness, experiential approach of psychotherapy, their inner experience, and starting to get to know their experience and what is there. So the intention is very strong, and also the setting of the work is very strong. There is a beautiful room with plants and candles and artwork that is inspiring. And when you walk into the room, it feels like you came to a safe, beautiful home. So it's not hospitalized at all, and it's part of the protocol. It's part of this humanistic approach that we want um, to offer to our clients, knowing that they came to a safe place, non-hierarchical. You know, there are of course boundaries and strong walls, but there is a sense of going into a journey together. The two therapists and the participants, of course, focusing on what the participants process needs. And we start listening to what's happening and giving some tools of how to be with the inner experience and how to trust this really intelligent force of healing and growth that is inside of us. So we as the professional, we know that we have the professional tools and we can guide, but really the main force or the main guide of the process is the inner experience of the client. And we really rely on that and trust that. We have 3 meetings of preparations, 90 minutes each, pretty much. And then we have an MDMA session. And they come to the same room, this beautiful, nourishing room, and they get the MDMA in the morning, usually around 9 o'clock. And they stay for 8 hours just under the influence with the two of us there, listening to what's happening in their body, in their heart, in their process, following it. It's beautiful and difficult. It's not a lovey-dovey experience. in most cases, and there are different, psychedelics in general is very mysterious in the sense of we don't know ahead of time what is going to happen. And the sessions can look in many different ways. But we follow what's there. Sometimes there are memories of the trauma, and then we process them together. We listen, and things are getting more organized. Emotions may show up. Sometimes the body is speaking, movements, shaking. So different ways. And some people are just into talking the story and talking their experience. And we're just being with them for those 8 hours. There is music that is being with the process, and the music was built for the session, and it really is supporting going inside and listening and letting the process guide the client and of course us. And after 8 hours the participant is exhausted, and so do us. And we end in closing, like a small closing ritual, kind of ending this ritual. And a night attendant is coming to spend the night with the participant in this room. So we won't leave them alone in the night. We go home very tired and satisfied and feeling very grateful and tired at the same time. And the morning after we come back, the therapy team is coming back, and we do the first integrative session. So we hear where they are, how they're doing, what's there for them after the day before with the MDMA. And then this is the process. We have a few more sessions, and then another MDMA with the 24-hour cycle, and then another few sessions for integration and preparation for the third session. And then we have an ending, 3 sessions for ending. And just to say that some people in the study are getting placebo. So they don't get the MDMA, they get sugar or something. And the process is similar. We do exactly the same. I was just ending a process with a client that I could swear, and I have a lot of experience, right? I could swear she got the MDMA and it was a placebo. I was pretty shocked. Actually, the 3 of us were like, really? She did such a beautiful, deep process with so many. So
the inner intelligence is there, even if there's no MDMA, right?
Totally.
There's something that gets activated in that intention, in that supportive environment, in that setting, and in the space. And sometimes this, as you're describing, I'm thinking about the intersubjective field, so it's what they sometimes it's called the therapeutic fourth. There's the set and setting, there's the therapist, there's the medicine, and there's the client. So it's the combination of these 4 elements that are coming together, and the magic happens right there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a few sessions without medicine, for psychotherapy, for processing, for intention, for preparation, and then these 24-hour sessions where the client stays over and sleeps and has integration the next day. Do you think that this kind of setting that's been used in the research is something that could be transferable to mainstream offering of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy? How do you see the adjustment of the research into, let's say, when phase 3 ends and hopefully will get legalized? How would that translate into regular psychotherapists doing this work outside of research settings?
Yeah, I definitely see it's being transferred, and I think it's important that we'll keep this quality of set and setting. I think it's not something we want to leave behind. So the way I see it, and we'll see, and it's changing in different countries because there are different policies, but the way I see it in Israel, I definitely see psychedelic clinics in which the teams are trained in psychedelic therapy, and we can offer not only MDMA psychotherapy, but also work with psilocybin and 5-MeO-DMT, like different substance during the years after looking at the studies and the research. And I think it's very important that we'll keep the screening process and we'll keep the teamwork that I didn't speak a lot about, but it's such an intense work. It's at least with PTSD and severe disorders, that I think it's very important to have team, not to have one therapist, but to have two therapists and to have the uh, psychiatrist in the background if needed, and um, the night the night attendant that is usually a beginner therapist or in school, and like and not to mention all the logistic help we get. So I think there is something about having psychedelic clinics in which this exact protocol can be transferred, that is very important. It will keep the quality, the depth of the work. I do think that not everybody will need eventually all those 3 sessions. Maybe some people 2 will be enough for them, and maybe some will need more. Yes,
Mhm.
that's something I think we need to be flexible in terms of the exact protocol that the client would need.
Mhm. And you mentioned that sometimes these sessions are very challenging. Unexpected things may happen.
Mhm.
Um, can you give an example of a particular situation that was challenging, or something that you know, that really needed both therapists to be there, or that was so important to have the team holding the space and the client? Was there any situations that were like that you really were glad to be in such an robust setting?
Yeah, we had a client that had a very um, heartbreaking or devastating memory showing up from a very early age. A memory he was not aware of um, before the MDMA session, and the way he need the container to be strong. It's like none of us. Like if I'm thinking, if I were there alone, I couldn't go to the bathroom or to drink something, just to go and rest for like 5 minutes with a tea, or like you really needed a person there all the time, was crying and sobbing and shaking and just going through such an intense experience for a few hours. Yeah, not for it wasn't a few minutes. So it was very important to have another person in the room, and so both of us can hold it. We use touch in a very professional, in a very careful way, but we sometimes it's not it's unethical not to touch, because
Mhm.
we talk a lot about if it's ethic to touch or not, but sometimes not to touch it will be an unethical move. So we held him, like we gave him a hand, and we a hand on his shoulder too, and we just held him for many, many hours. And it was very important to be the two of us there. And in the week after the session, which is the week after the MDMA session, we really pay attention to how's the participant doing. We have a few phone calls during the week, and we staying in a very close touch. And it was very difficult for him, a very difficult week, to realize what happened in the family and to have the emotions shows up. The body was shaking a lot. So we invited him to come back to the room, to the clinic, and he spent another night there. And we invited the night attendant to stay the night there with him again. And I came, the psychiatrist came, and we had to check if he needs some medical like medication. He didn't need any, but it felt safe to know that there is an option in case it's getting to be way too much for him. It didn't need it. We went through the process, continue with the process of crying and shaking and realizing what happened. And the whole thing got integrated beautifully, which is what psychedelic uh, really helped doing. It's really going through the experience in a full way, to feel the pain, to feel the grief, to know the memory, and to reintegrate this experience. So it was so supportive for me to know that I'm not there alone with him, that there is another wonderful therapist and the team that is holding this, really this memory. All of us held this memory together for him, with him. And I think it was very healthy.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And you also were mentioning that in the phase two, many clients didn't, 60% didn't, they had a reduction of symptoms, right? A remission of symptoms after 2 sessions. And
But with different protocols in different places, but in Israel it was 2 sessions. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm here thinking, you're talking about severe PTSD and highly traumatized individuals that meet criteria, diagnostic criteria for this kind of treatment. And I'm thinking about clients with complex trauma, with developmental wounding, with attachment disorders, where the clinical work is usually relational, it's usually long-term. Um, how do you see MDMA being used for the treatment of complex trauma? If you were to infer in terms of what you said, how would this transfer then? What is the flexibility and adjustments? And how do you see this treatment being also effective for not only PTSD, but complex trauma?
Well, we have people with complex trauma in the study.
Okay.
Yeah, so we definitely have experience with that. And I would say that from my own personal experience, so it's not about the whole study, but my personal experience in the study with my clients, I think it's working very well. But there is a challenge here. So it's working very well because the therapeutic relationship are very strong in the study. It's a big, as you said beautifully, it's part of the field, and it's the fourth or the it's a very important compound, and I think there is a lot of attachment repair, and there are missing experiences that for the client that is happening in the therapeutic relationship, and the MDMA is very much supporting that, and the whole protocol, the way it built, and it's based on therapy first, and the MDMA is allowing the participant to feel connected, to embody safety in relationship and openness and vulnerability in relationship, which is exactly what was not safe and was actually very dangerous to do in the original relationship that created the complex PTSD. So I think it's a very good method. It's a very good treatment for complex PTSD, but it's very important when the legality is will come, and hopefully we'll see it in the next maybe 2-3 years, that the therapy will continue. So now we have to end in few months, and that's it. The protocol is ending, the study is ending, the participant is finishing. Our exit plan is very, very meaningful. We're creating a continuance to our participants. We invite them to continue to therapy. We help them find a therapist. Many times doing the work in the research, they find different practices that are meaningful for them. They're realizing movement is an important part for them, or mindfulness practices. And so we strongly encourage them to go and find 5 rhythms or any kind of internal somatic movement, or start meditate and go to more like spiritual. So we create an exit plan that supports that, but it's not enough for complex PTSD. The ideal way will be to continue the therapy. So I hope that with the legality, we could do that too.
Yeah, so that's I guess what my question was leading, that for complex trauma, the psychological treatment, the psychotherapy would have to continue. So
Yes.
while the MDMA has immense potential and effectiveness in treating and opening up, the perceived sense of trust is enhanced, right? Qualities of self-forgiveness, of self-support, openness. It really brings about a whole lot of feelings and experiences that is a tremendous asset to the healing of traumatic experiences. However, traumatic experiences sometimes it take longer than just a few journeys, and it would be, so the idea here is as I ask you that question, I'm also affirming that for the audience, that is to think about healing in a long-term treatment, and to think about psychotherapy as an adjunct to medicine-assisted sessions.
Yeah.
For some cases, it will be necessary. And it's what actually allows for that full transformation to be utilized by the client on a day-to-day, which is a lot of times what's called the integration, what happens after the session. For some clients, the integration is, it takes a long time. It takes a continuation of a psychotherapeutic process and continuing to be held in that format for the changes to be really in place. Would you agree?
I'm so much agree. And also to say that I think for all clients, not only with complex PTSD, I think the integration piece, really, ideally, I would recommend continuing it. Because even if we help treating the PTSD, which is a specific kind of wound in a specific place in the brain, where the nervous system is participating in a specific way, when the PTSD is transformed in some major ways, there is still a lot of psychological work. So, which is different than working on the PTSD. So I would strongly recommend to all the participants to continue with therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this treatment, I imagine, would be very expensive. So what are the ideas of this kind of treatment being affordable, being accessible? Are there ideas of having health insurance or group therapy? What are the thoughts around making this kind of treatment that is so well held, so safe, so effective, be widely available?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the actual method, group therapy is the next thing we would like to check because it makes it more affordable. So we are planning to start a research in Israel with 2 MDMA sessions, and then the third one will be a group session. And then maybe the study after will be 1 MDMA session that is like a personal MDMA, and then the second and the third maybe will be in a group. So that's still to be studied. There is another group study that will start in the US too. And we're also looking at different modalities of therapy. So we're looking at prolonged exposure. We have a study starting with Professor Edna Foa. And we look at PE with MDMA and see if it's, maybe we can do it in a shorter time for the PTSD part, not for the psychological that needs to, as we said. So we're trying to look at different modalities in the studies now. That will be our future studies. But in Israel, we would like to go to a place where the state is paying for this kind of treatment as part of the social services. So in Israel, many of the medical services are being offered pretty much for free, and that's one protocol that we think, and the Ministry of Health agree with us at this point, that it would be good to offer it as part of the free services. And definitely in places where the social system, medical system is different, it needs to be covered by the health insurances. Yeah, and I think it's also wise for the health insurance companies, because people with severe PTSD, they consume a lot of services. You will see them with more heart problems and blood pressure problems, and definitely therapy, and it impacts their families and their ability to work, their ability of their families to work, and it impacts the whole community. So I think for the long run, and that's something we are studying now, we're starting to ask the participants in future studies, we're going to ask to look at what were the medical expenses before the study, and then in the years after, to see what the benefits for the larger system, what are they. And my guess is that it will be wise financially to offer this treatment and to save all those circles of expenses.
Mm-hmm. And impact, yeah, and the system and the families in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in terms of the modalities, what is the ideas of the different modalities? I know of the co-joint therapy for PTSD in couples with the cognitive behavior co-joint therapy. Are there any other diagnostic criteria, any other ideas of expansion for the study with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy?
Well, there was a very beautiful study for social MDMA therapy for social anxiety for autistic adults. But just to be clear, we worked on the study was exploring the reduction or the influence on the social anxiety. It's not treating autism.
Mm-hmm.
but it's treating the social anxiety, and the results were good. So that's something to look at, social anxiety. We're also starting to look at eating disorders, and we're starting studies with that. So they didn't start yet, but we plan to do that. And we're also starting, in Israel at least, to look at specific kind of traumas. So we're going to have a study with victim of tortures in actually Palestinians, victim of tortures, and to see what, because it's a specific kind of trauma, and to see what MDMA psychotherapy is doing for that. And in the other side of the political spectrum, we're going to do a study with soldiers that were walking inside the occupied territories and were in costumes, and they were part of the population there, kind of hiding. So their trauma is very much about shame and guilt of what happened, and other than the sometimes life-threatening situation they were and experienced. So we're trying to look at different populations. For me personally, it was also important to have different, like to go both to the Palestinians and to the Israelis, and to try to look at all those awful things that happening all over the world, really, but specifically in the Middle East, and to see how can we contribute and how we can work with those traumas that are, again, influencing so many circles.
Absolutely, very important to recognize the political trauma, the social trauma, the historical trauma.
Exactly.
And in your context, you're talking about Israelis and Palestinians, and you are beginning to plan for MDMA treatment for the specific instances that you're describing. I know that MAPS has already been involved in some political reconciliations between Israel and Palestine with the help of psychedelic medicines, not MDMA. Could you tell us a little bit about that research and its outcomes, just as we're on this topic?
Yeah, so MAPS is supporting, we work with Dr. Lior Rosman, who is part of the team of Imperial College in London, and is very much into exploring reconciliation in groups and to see what psychedelic in group is, how it's influencing conflicts and social conflicts. So one research that he was already finished and is going to be published soon, he interviewed, I think, 31 participants in ayahuasca ceremonies, Palestinians and Israelis, and he kind of asked about the aspects of the relationship between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So one thing he discovered that there is a unity-based connection that people explored. So they explored one, like Palestinians explored Israelis and Israelis Palestinians in a way that beyond this political or national or social identity. So they felt themselves as humans that are more than just this identity, kind of a unity quality. And at the same time, which I think is really important to kind of name and discover, he also saw that there is a different base connection. So they actually recognized the differences between them, and they got connected to the foreign culture. So to hear an Arabic prayer and to feel, like that's part of life for me too as an Israeli, yeah, and the opposite. And he also saw that people met in the psychedelic, in the ayahuasca, they met different experiences that are related to the conflict because of the presence of the other. So memories from their personal traumas, personal social traumas. So they met the wounds also because the context was bi-cultural, bi-national. So a very interesting study, and it continues, and we support, of course, the study as MAPS continues to explore it in different ways.
Yeah, I would love to see some of those efforts to address historical trauma in the United States.
Yeah.
And so, as we're coming back to our main topic here, and we're looking into the licensed legalization of psychedelics, specifically MDMA, as is in phase 3 of the clinical trials. And you've described some here tonight that the conducting these psychedelic sessions is not a classical clinical experience, right? It takes more out of the clinician, it takes a team, but it also takes specific skills. So how do you see the development of training? And since you are also a trainer and have trained already a number of people in Israel, what are the important elements that you think it's important for people to be able to do this work?
I think the team, and it can be divided into two people, right? It's not just specifically one person, but I think the therapy team should have like, I would say 3 legs. For the psychedelic therapist or therapy team should have um, 3 legs. The first one, I think we need to have a clinic, more like a traditional clinical background. So to know about PTSD, to know about to be psychotherapists that are trained in clinical modalities. Um, one piece. The second piece that I think is very important is to have some kind of body, mind, spirit orientation. So for me, it's more the Hakomi, but there are many wonderful modalities that knows how to invite a person to experience themselves. So experiential based, that is therapy that is open to mystical experiences or to somatic experience and allow those to be part of the therapy. I think it's important. And the third piece is the psychedelic training to learn about the specifics of psychedelic therapy, about the countertransference, and that are specifically important in psychedelic therapies. They're very strong about the intensity of the experience, about boundaries that are a bit different. Person is lying and touch is there, about ethics, the ethics of psychedelic, which is so important. So to learn specifically about the techniques, about the beingness of the therapist, about learning to trust the unknown that psychedelics ask us to do, because it's not that we tell the client what to do, we invite him or her to go inside and to listen and then to follow what's there. Yeah. So I think those 3 are very, very important. And there is a debate in the field, but I'm very clear about the need for the therapist to have his own or her own or their own personal experience with psychedelics. Otherwise, for me at least, it's like teaching yoga without doing yoga, without knowing yoga. Yeah. So I think it's very, very important. I would say it's challenging. It's challenging because we have many people we need to train, and to have a psychedelic experience is not of course, it's not legal yet. So we have studies that are specifically for the therapist of the trainings, so they can experience MDMA psychotherapy. But I think it's very, very important. And the last piece will be supervision. After they finishing their psychedelic training, having some kind of body-oriented transpersonal orientation and the clinical professional background, I think it's very important to have in the first few experiences supervision and to get feedback and to learn. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So a number of core skills here, right? To develop that an empathic, abiding presence, to be able to work with the trust and the enhancement of the trust in the process, in the client, in the medicine, to work with that spiritual intelligence that such processes bring about, to have knowledge of the physical and psychological effects that the drugs have. The therapist, self-awareness, the integrity around ethics, a good solid clinical training, and some competency and complementary techniques that would be also important because of for integration, for also for the beginning and all of that. And what you are highlighting here is that you think it's important that the therapist has familiarity with mystical states of consciousness, that the person facilitating the sessions have had an opportunity to contact themselves in that space, so that they know how to make meaning out in that existential space. They are familiar with the transcendence nature of the self. They have that feeling of experience of love or impermanence or change, a lot of sometimes ego dissolving, a lot of experiences that the psychedelics would bring about. And what you are highlighting is also that there is a challenge in training people because of the nature of the prohibition around the use of substances, that not always people have access to experiences that are safe and legal so that they can actually develop those capacities. And so that's an important aspect of the training, would you say, for the development of the field? I'm wondering when we're going to be able to do this at CIS, because we train therapists a lot and we have so many of these other ways, and we do use meditation and contemplative practices and spirituality and somatic oriented techniques in order to develop some of these qualities. But we don't have yet is an opportunity for students to undergo medicine. And I'm wondering if that is what you see as a future development of the field.
Definitely, and we work on that with the Ministry of Health. So we want our therapists to experience the MDMA at this point, but I think slowly with the psilocybin and more substance. And at this point, we do it only in clinical trials. So there is a clinical trial for therapists to come and experience, and we look at self-compassion. We look at different qualities of therapy, and we looking to see if there is any influence on that, and of course on safety. But for the long run, I think we need to have it as part of the training. And I know that MAPS department of the training department, which is a wonderful one and creates a wonderful training, I think, is all the time thinking about ways to embody the work and ways to offer that. And hopefully in Israel, the Ministry of Health will allow us, I hope sooner than later, to have a clinic for the psychotherapists that are in our training, so they can know that. You know, one of the woman that in charge on trauma in the Ministry of Health, her name is Bella Ben Gershon, and she was invited to our study in the US actually to experience MDMA psychotherapy. So because we wanted her to know what it is about, and she got it because she understood it, and she had a very meaningful experience, and she became a big supporter of the work.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful story. I love to hear that. And how about for you, Keren, as we're coming to the end of our time here today, and I will be opening the questions to the audience in a few minutes. But I was wondering for you, personally, professionally, what have been some of the major influences that led you to this work?
Definitely, you know, CIS, I think it's a very meaningful, it's an important place, I think, for many people. And for me personally, I really deepen into who I am, both personally and professionally, through the somatic program and the East-West. Yeah, the different teachers and mentors I found there. I also found Hakomi in CIS. One of my teachers there was Rob Fisher, who became a colleague and a friend, and he taught Hakomi in the somatic program. And then I kind of went into the Hakomi Institute of California, which is a very another meaningful place for me, where I learned Hakomi and was trained as a trainer for Hakomi. And Ido and I, we opened the Hakomi Institute of Israel when we came back. So that's another foot that I have here in Israel that is very meaningful for me. I was blessed. Part of my family are working with psychedelics in Mexico for many years. So Francoise Boza and Aaron Grospard, they kind of exposed me to the Mazatec tradition, and I learned a lot about psychedelics, about life really, and I'm very grateful for them. Ido, you know, is a kind of helps me embody in our life the different learning and you know passion that we have to somatics, to transpersonal, to psychedelics, raising our kids together. Yeah.
And coming out of that personal vision, that personal path, into a larger vision. Do you have a larger vision of what psychedelic assisted psychotherapy could become, could be?
I really hope to see psychedelic clinics, specifically all over Israel and Palestine eventually, and in the Middle East in general, and to have them outside of the hospitals. Right now, we are doing it only in a hospital in Israel. All the studies, everything is inside the hospital. In the state, it's not like that. Some of the clinics of the studies outside of the hospital. So I would like that to be in nature, in beautiful places with great trained teams, and that people can come when they need to, to see what kind of medicine they need. Is it MDMA? Is it psilocybin? Is it ayahuasca? So my vision includes different kinds of medicines, because I think we are still exploring it, but each medicine is working on specific dimensions or and can work well with specific challenges. We don't know a lot about that yet, and we're still exploring it. But MDMA, ayahuasca, mushrooms with psilocybin, 5-MeO, DMT, and different things, I think can be very, um, can just help us, to suffer less and to live life in a full way with more freedom and happiness, and especially after the COVID. I'm saying after because in Israel, most of us are vaccinated and it feels like we're in a, hopefully in starting the after party. But I think many people are deeply traumatized, from different reasons, financial reasons, and it was real existential.
Existential.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm telling you this English. Uh, so I think people are in real need, and I think psychedelic can help with that. And maybe one thing to say about that I feel it very strongly in Israel in the political, atmosphere, but I think it's also true for the state, that people are very much focused on themselves, their need, what's good for them, maybe to their kids and family, and what psychedelic knows to do well when with the right set and setting, with the therapy before and after, is to help people recognize that they are part of something bigger, part of the community, part of the culture, part of society, part of the earth, of our earth that is, not in such a good place, to say the least, the ecological situation. So if we'll slowly, with the help of psychedelics, we'll know ourselves as part of something bigger. And um, I hope and believe that the commitment um, to help to those other dimensions, to be active and to be social active, to be generous, to be creative, to think about and to feel and to sense in all dimensions of who we are, of how to participate in life and in reducing all this damage and suffering that there is all over. So I think that's really important, and that's really my motivation.
Wonderful. So a more embodied, a more connected, a more sustainable, a fully participatory way of living and being with one another and the planet. And
Mhm.
and clinics that are connected to nature and that have available medicines for different people in different moments, and
Mhm. And that
possibility for healing on an integral way, in a sustainable
helps.
way.
Yeah, a clinic that helps people to remember who they are. That we are both individuals with this body mind systems, but we're also bigger than that. We are connected to the spirit. We are connected to nature. We are connected to all other human beings around the planet. I think if those clinics can flourish and offer this vision, I think we will be in a different state as humanity.
Yeah, so that's beautiful. Hope for planetary transformation and the improvement of humanity, right? And we have to, if there is something that we know we have to, is to become better humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I will begin to turn over to the questions of the audience. And let's see here. I have a question from Laura, and she is asking, how can practitioners draw the line between utilizing psychedelics as a powerful healing modality and still prevent dependency for deeply traumatized individuals?
Well, I would say that the treatment is not something that I would say with most participants that I worked with, they coming with with cautiousness, with some resistance, with difficulty to the psychedelic session, because it's not just about positive mystical experiences. There are some of that. Um, um, it's very much about meeting our traumas and our difficulties. Even with healthy people, we will invite them to meet the wounded parts of ourselves with the beauty and love and connection. And so I don't think it creates a real dependency. I don't think it's something that is calling to be done on a regular basis, or it's something that is invited to happen as needed according to how restricted we feel and wounded we feel, and also according to how much we want to grow into the potential we are. But it needs to be a mindful choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to chime in on that because I often, because the idea of psychedelics as a consumer culture is one that I would love to see us moving away from that.
Yeah.
Right. So not something that you can just use over and over again and not get any results from it. Then there needs to be a way of looking at how it's being used.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the proper use, the right engagement with the medicine and the right amount and the right setting is the answer to preventing abuse, drug abuse.
Definitely.
And the second question here, and I think it's somewhat related to that, maybe a question from Megan. She would like to hear your thoughts on microdosing and the depletion that can occur over time. So our audience is concerned.
What do you mean by depletion?
I guess, I don't know because there's no more specifics, but she's inferring that the constant use would lead to depletion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't have much experience with microdosing. From what I know, which is not much, I think it can help greatly with symptoms. So I would guess that there is something similar to SSRIs or like to more Western psychiatrist medication. So people that take it for a long time may feel less the depression, the anxiety, they feel more creative. So in this term, I think there is a real potential there to feel less in suffering. But I think it needs to be, again, exactly like you said just a minute ago, it needs to be used in a mindfulness and accurate way, and to use the relief and the creativity that is being created for the healing process. So to take that into therapy and to walk through and go back to the wounds. Because what we do with the full doses, we don't walk with the symptoms. We go to the original wound and we help it transform, and then the symptoms are not there anymore because what was creating the symptoms is not there. With microdosing, I don't know that it happens. I don't think so. Like my guess that it's not happening. So we need to use the new space that is in a relief from the system from the symptoms um, in order to create the healing of the original wound. And then I don't think we'll see depletion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another question. This one is from Janelle. And she would love to hear any thoughts on MDMA assisted psychotherapy for couples.
So there was a very good study with cognitive behavioral co-joint psychotherapy for couples, 6 couples. One of them was traumatized, meaning he was diagnosed or she was diagnosed with PTSD, and the other was not. And we saw 2 things in the study. It was MAPS study. The first was that there were reduction in the PTSD symptoms, and the second one, which is I think relevant to the general questions about couples and MDMA, they showed in the study more satisfaction from the relationship. And I think that it's a very good method for couple therapy, because what it creates is it takes off some of the defenses that I believe are not needed anymore, because some of them are staying. So it's a question what stays and why. So I think the ones that are not needed so much anymore are being reduced. Less shame, less pride of the ego. So people can be much more vulnerable and talk about their needs and their vulnerability, and not so much react um, to the need. So instead of blaming, which we are very good at, right? Most of us, instead of blaming and putting the responsibility on the other, the MDMA allow us to go in and to see, okay, what is it that is hard for me? What is my need around that? What is the piece in me that is getting activated in the relationship? And from that, to come to the partner to share that, it's a totally different experience than a real than a regular fight, right? It's really saying this is what's happening in me, and this is what I need, and it's very vulnerable for me. And there is something very sacred about that when the couples do it together. And I think there is a lot of potential there to do it with people that are not like healthy people, normal neurotic people like us, right? Without a, not that we don't have our traumas, but you know what I mean. Not only with PTSD.
Mhm. Here, an anonymous question. How is the dosage determined? And what about the bad come downs?
Mhm. The doses are we have two options. Um, I forgot the numbers now, but I think that the one we start from 80 and then we get a booster of 40. I don't think I'm accurate here. I forgot exactly the numbers, but we have also a larger dose of 120 and then a booster. So we start from a lower one, and then for the most part, we recommend increasing, but it's not based on weight. It just, we have two sides. And usually we increase the dose. Um, what was the second part of the question?
The bad come
Ah,
downs, the
yeah,
aftermath.
yeah. So I think that in the study we see it less than we hear about it from parties and so on. I think there is a difference in so many ways. The set and the setting, the process is very much held. It's not sleeping through the night and having more like lots of energy dancing, or having more substance with the MDMA that are activating the system and makes it tired. So I think there is more kind of a down in parties, and so at least that's what I hear. But we do have after the session many times emotional level that is grief and sad and pain in the week, even after the session, in many in least cases I saw. And I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a good thing. After the session was over, there was a lot of process, many things happened, and then the emotions are showing up, the sadness, the grief, again, the pain. And that's a wonderful thing. It's not a problem. It's a wonderful thing to process, to give space to go through. Yeah, so we won't see it as a part that is difficult or unnecessary. It's a meaningful, beautiful part of the healing.
And it's held within this treatment modality. So that's another important. So as the person comes down and has maybe adversary effects, either by the pharmaceutical effect of the drug or by the emotional effect, there's a way of understanding that in the context of their healing and holding the space for that.
Yeah.
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 And somebody here wants to know, what resources or trainings or books would you recommend for a trainee who wants to someday incorporate MDMA assisted psychotherapy into their private practice?
So again, it goes back to those three legs that I think are good. So I think it's good to have a solid clinical background. So to go and get some academical clinical education. I think it's very good to have some kind of integrative psychotherapy training, like Hakomi, focusing. There are many more. Yeah, and then to enter into a psychedelic Janice Fels is doing a wonderful psychedelic training in CIIS, and MAPS, we have our training. So that would be the third part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Larry is asking, there was a mention to countertransference, and if there is a generalization that you could make about countertransference that occurs in psychedelic therapy.
I would say that the one that is unique in two ways, and it's important to know about, is the one that you feel like the best person therapist. Like I feel the most wise, beautiful, creative, smart person ever with the countertransference of psychedelics. And I think there is something to say about divine transference, to feel like people are projecting the divine, because the mystical experiences, especially with the classic psychedelics, but not only, also with MDMA, the openness, the connection to the deep qualities of love and compassion, and sometimes mystical experiences, sometimes those are being projected. And then as the therapist, you become like, oh, I'm a goddess. No, you're not. Uh, right? So it's very, very important to remember that, and not to fall into the identification with that, right? Because that's not healthy. So I would say that's the most important one if I have to choose one now that is unique for psychedelics. Also because of the volumes. Everything in psychedelics, the volumes are much higher. And that's another part, another reason why it's important to have an experience as a therapist as part of your training, because then you know those volumes from inside. You know what it is to feel the pain of all pains, right? Or the sorrow of all sorrows. So then you can hold it with your client when they go through that.
Yeah, and then another plug here, because I cannot help it in my position as a training psychotherapist, the importance of clinical training, so that people are working on their countertransference and are staying with the ethical standards of the profession and holding the clinical boundaries. So when they feel that sense of love and elation, either because the client is in a healing process that is very powerful and they attribute that to themselves, or they like the projection of them being, gods or goddesses, that they have enough self-awareness and supervision and are tracking that countertransference very closely, so it's not acted out in the therapeutic relationship. That's also another reason that I think it's so important to work in a team and have another therapist there, and be able to manage those feelings. So again, so the therapists don't get elated and don't act out on that expansion, that love, that magic that may come about, and still maintain the parameters of a clinical and ethical relationship, because the healing of the client will be impaired if that is not in place. And it can get very confusing for a client if the therapist doesn't have a good hold of their countertransference feelings.
It can be very wounding,
Yeah.
especially in this vulnerable open space of psychedelics.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I'm glad we addressed that.
Just
Amy.
Gisele, just to say a second before, it's all about integrity, professional and personal integrity. And I think integrity in this kind of work is very, very important. And we need to have our personal process to walk through and to embody our integrity, and our professional integrity that you talked about. Yeah.
Yes, I just see a question here from a dear former student, Amy Marikel, so I'm going to read it. And she's asking, she's interested in whether the research into MDMA or other medicines for healing, into the treatment of chronic pain that might have roots in developmental trauma.
Yeah, so there are thoughts about that. There may be something in the field that I'm not familiar with. In Israel specifically, we are thinking about a study with psilocybin for addiction for opiates that is coming with chronic pain. So we're thinking about it, but we're not quite there yet. We're thinking about the protocol, about yeah. But I think it's a very good direction to go. I think it's something that needs to be explored.
Yeah,
There are studies with cluster headaches that have positive results. I think it's a very good place to go. And maybe to say that I think in general, we'll have a lot, I'm guessing, we'll have a lot more of studies in the psychological world, like the disorders of psychiatric disorders, psychological disorders. But I think we start to see more and more studies that are related to physical medicine. So I'm kind of curious about Crohn's disease, colitis, autoimmune disease, and I think we may find some very interesting things there.
Mhm. And you were mentioning, and there's a question here from Kara that is around how does the MDMA compare to psilocybin as a therapy? And why would you suggest one versus the other in treatment? And does one do something better than the other?
I think so. I think some are more. It's not better than the other in general, but I think first it's better to start with MDMA just because it's more personal oriented and the self is not melting in such a strong way so fast. So it's an introduction for psychedelic experience. But specifically, I think MDMA is very good for PTSD because of the qualities of the experience, the characteristics of the experience under the MDMA is exactly what is missing with PTSD, right? We talked about it. And psilocybin, I think if you give it as first line of treatment for PTSD, it can be very, very difficult. It maybe won't be so useful even because there is so much of disintegration into something that is bigger than the individual. And also, I think trauma is a very much a nervous system, physical, brain related disorder. So it's very good with MDMA invite you to many times to stay in the body, to explore the body, and I think it's important with trauma. With depression, for example, there are lots of studies with depression and psilocybin. There is my theory, I'm not sure it's true, but there is more rigidity of the self. Yeah, so there is something about the psilocybin that is opening up and inviting expansion that is can go very well with depression. And of course, and we see that the results are very good with major depression, with treatment resistant, with the depression, with the end of life depression and anxiety. So I think we don't know a lot yet, but there is a lot to explore. And I think that eventually we will discover that different doses and different substances are better for specific, we'll have to map it. And I think that's part of our challenge in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I want to plug in to the audience that in a month from now, we're going to have the third and last cycle of this series of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and it will be on psilocybin, the next one. So for those who are interested in deepening this question and this inquiry, tune into our next conversation in a month from now. And another question here, and it will be two more, and then we'll be done. Can you speak to the safety of use during perinatal phases? Somebody wanting to get pregnant or during pregnancy or postpartum nursing?
Yeah, we don't know enough. At least I don't know enough about that. So we don't, it's a exclusion criteria. We won't get anybody that is pregnant. And if somebody is getting pregnant, we ask for commitment not to get pregnant during the study. It may be damaging. We just don't know enough. So I wouldn't recommend psychedelic in pregnancy. I'm not sure about lactation and um, the month after. I would just say from my personal experience, I think the year after giving birth is so meaningful and open and intense. And I didn't feel the need to do psychedelics in this period. And I think the birth itself and the pregnancy, birth, and the beginning of motherhood or parenthood are a psychedelic experience by itself. So I would say that for most part, unless there is some extreme situation, it's better just to surrender to the experience of it as is.
Yes, and for if Quantanese is wondering about postpartum depression, I want to say that there are some studies right now being done with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy for postpartum depression, and that's out of a clinic here from the Bay Area. Melissa Whipple and Phil Wilson are involved in that, so that might be something you want to look into. And the last question from Shane, it says, thank you, Keren, for your experience, your wisdom, your leadership in this work. I'm wondering if anything have you seen in your research as far as issues that seem to not benefit from MDMA?
Yeah, so we have a group of people that, like in phase 2, 68% are not considered to have PTSD 12 years after the treatment. The rest of the people, with most of them, we see uh, we see improvement, but it's not going below the line of the PTSD. But with some people, we don't see improvement. Yeah, and I don't know yet to map it and to say why this happens like that here. That's again still needs to be studied.
All right. Well, Keren, was so wonderful to have you with us tonight. We were at sunset here. You were at sunrise in Israel. I can see it's daylight there. So I'm going to wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and so heartwarming to see you again, a dear friend. And I'm so proud of you and Ido and your collaboration and your leadership, your innovation in Israel alongside the Hakomi Institute, alongside MAPS, and serving the development of the field in such a profound way. So I want to say congratulations to this time in life, to this work. And I hope that our audience felt inspired and feel a connection to a lot of what you shared, to what could be applied here in the United States as well. And yeah, thank you so much. Any final thoughts that you want to have for us to close our night together?
Just to thank you. It was lovely and it's just really nice to feel our sisterhood through the years. And thank you for inviting me. And yeah.
So many hugs and kisses to you. And I will invite now Jason back.
Thank you all so much for attending today. We hope that you'll join us for more of our upcoming talks and workshops. This conversation was recorded. If you would like to watch it again or share it with the community, it will be available on our YouTube channel at the same link and on our Facebook page. We will also feature this talk on our podcast, which you can find at www.ciispod.com or by searching CIIS Public Programs on your favorite podcast app. Thanks again for joining us, and good night.